Okay, welcome. This is Algorithm Design and Analysis. I'm going to be your professor. I'm Emmett Gray. So I just prepared a short PowerPoint presentation to kind of introduce you to the course. Okay, so let's just go through the slides. All right, so welcome. This is actually one of those kind of it's a nitty-gritty kind of a course. You really basically want to be a programmer if you're taking these courses, okay? This is like a follow-up to the data structures class. So data structures and algorithms kind of go together. I'm going to try my best to make this kind of interesting and fun. I'm not sure how successful I'm going to be, but I'm going to try. So yeah, this is a very in-depth course, and there's an awful lot of math in this course. Up to this point in your college career, you may not have had that much math in computer science classes, but this is a lot. But I tend to stress philosophies rather than the details, hopefully. Okay, so about this class. This is a hybrid class, which basically means there's asynchronous video lectures like what you're seeing now that are recorded in advance. And then there's face-to-face lab. So some of them are on Monday and some of them are on Wednesday, kind of to split up the group into smaller pieces. This is not a self-paced course. I mean, you're going to have to, there's things that are due every week. So what are the prerequisites? Yeah, you're going to be proficient in some programming language. Now, I don't really care what programming language it is that you're using, but you're going to need to be proficient in some language. Java or C++ or C# or Visual Basic, something. And then the textbook. So the textbook is this guy. Now this is actually a rather old textbook. It's I think it's even out of print. So they may actually be hard to find, although I stopped by the bookstore and they seem to have plenty of them. It's Analysis of Algorithms, 2nd edition. Now I tend to supplement the material in the book an awful lot. In fact, there's an entire chapter which is that I teach that is not in the book at all. So yeah, it's definitely, the book is helpful, but it is not the source of everything that's being presented. Okay, so a hybrid course, which means, the lab, half of you show up on Monday, half of you show up on Wednesday. The way it works is I'll release, for example, on week 3, I'll release the week 3 chapter 3 video, but the lab for the next week is going to be discussing the thing. In other words, just because the video release doesn't mean, oh my God, I have to stop what I'm doing, quick, watch that video right now. No, you don't, because the lab is 1 week out of synchronization. That makes sense? So week 4, we're going to be talking about the lecture from week 3, which gives you plenty of time to watch the lecture. Okay. So these are online lectures. I mean, asynchronous. I release them every Monday morning. So typically one chapter a week. Each video's somewhere in the vicinity of 45 minutes to maybe an hour long. The videos are broken up into 15-minute chunks because I know you have a life and you need to stop and take a break or go, the dog's barking to be let out, or your kids running around, or maybe you just need a potty break. I don't care. Whatever it is, it's broken up into 15-minute chunks to help you manage your life. Now, I record these things in not the superest duperest resolution, just to make them small enough so you can run it on practically any device. The smaller the format, 720p format. So it works great. And I mentioned that you can use a little gear to speed up the video. So you can actually speed up the video, and it doesn't distort my voice like Alvin and the Chipmunks, but it just makes it run faster. That's a cool thing that you can do. Asynchronous content. Since these things are recorded in advance, there's no opportunity for you to raise your hand and go, but wait, I had a problem with that. So basically you have 2 choices. If it's one of those burning questions that you kind of sort of need to be able to get to, well then send me an email on Canvas and say, okay, I just finished watching your video lecture on, chapter 99, and I was really confused about this one point. Could you go over it again? That's fantastic. Or if it's something that can wait, well, at the lab, you can say, I had a little trouble understanding what you meant by this. And I say, oh, well, let's go through that. Either way. So there is time in the lab schedule to ask questions. Or, I'd recommend you send the email, even if you don't, even if we talk about it in the lab, send me your questions soon so I can be thinking about it. And of course, if it's not something about the lecture, you're in the middle of working on an assignment and you go, wait a minute, what did he mean by that? So you send me an email or talk to me in the lab and say, what does this mean? Or, this is how I got this far and I'm kind of stuck. What am I supposed to do next? That's perfectly okay. That's what professors are for, is to help you with assignments. Okay, so what are the requirements for this course? So first of all, it should be fairly obvious that practically everything is done through Canvas. All the assignments and quizzes and whatever. No paper things, right? We're not turning in paper at all. Which means, of course, you need access to a decent machine when you're at home. So Windows-based computers probably preferred, although it's not required. Windows 7 is the bare bones minimum. Most people by now probably have Windows 10 or they're using Mac OS. The university has computers in their lab and they're running Windows 10. And of course, you need a reliable internet connection. One of the stories I tell is I had a student a million years ago who lived out in the boonies someplace. And every time there was, a slightest hint of rain, her phone and internet would go out. And so she was always afraid that, it'd be in the middle of a quiz or something and, boop, she'd lose the internet. So she actually drove out to the college whenever she, thought the weather was going to be bad, to do her exams in the computer lab. I know, a little crazy, huh? So yeah, you need a reliable internet connection. Okay, so yes, you are going to be writing programs, but I don't really care what programming language you need. Whichever one you need. If you want C#, great. If you want Java, that's fantastic. Just whatever the heck you want, I'm happy with it. So practically any programming language will work. Now the textbook is using pseudocode. Pseudocode is kind of funky. It's not real programming language, and one of the skills you're going to learn is how to translate from pseudocode into whatever. Translate it into Java, translate it into C++ or C# or Visual Basic or whatever. And you are going to need to be able to create Microsoft Word and Excel documents. Yeah. So, and I think most people know that, you can get a copy of Office 365 through the university at no cost. So that's pretty cool. So what are your expectations? You're going to learn an awful lot about instrumenting algorithms, testing them to see how many loops it takes and how long it takes. And doing this is going to help sharpen your programming skills, because you're going to have to choose, which one of these 4 algorithms is the best one in this scenario? And then applying math and all the rest of these things. Yes, you are going to write small applications. So we're going to cover all 11 chapters in the book, plus a chapter on regular expression, which is not in the book. That's what NIB stands for, not in book. So yes, all 11 chapters, plus stuff that's not. Now, I show this at the beginning of every class, just to kind of set the tone for what to expect. So, in early education, you're in elementary school, you were probably down at the bottom of the pyramid, define, duplicate, list, memorize, repeat, state, those kinds of things. But, we're in college now, so I don't want you to just remember things. I want you to understand them and apply them. And in our case, we're going to be doing some analyzation. So you're going to have to understand things like describe, discuss, explain, and apply them, like solve, use, demonstrate. And then you're going to have to apply things like differentiate, compare, contrast, distinguish, examine, experiment. We're going to be doing lots of experiments. So we're going to be analyzing these algorithms, and you're going to be drawing conclusions based upon what you have learned. So yes, this is running experiments and coming up with conclusions is a very high level thing that we need to be doing. So just to kind of drive this point home, let's talk about, what versus why. So a what kind of question is, what's the capital of South Dakota? And the correct answer, in my opinion, is I don't know, but I'll look it up. Because quite frankly, we don't need to memorize state capitals anymore. That's just not useful. I'm not sure it was ever useful, but it certainly is not useful now that everyone has a phone and go, Okay. The answer is Pierre. So I'm not asking you questions like that. Very rarely do I ever say, have a test question that says, define the following term. Because if I did, I know what you do. You'd grab it, the thing, you'd throw it in Google, and whatever the heck Google spit out, you'd copy and paste, right? That don't work. Okay, that's not learning. That's testing your Google search skills, which is not one of the student learning outcomes of this course. Okay. So I'm into why rather than what. So almost all of my test questions are, explain why, given this scenario, this option is better than that option. You know, you're not going to be able to copy and paste that into Google and get anything useful at all. Okay, so it's going to be why one choice is better, or what are the long-term effects for making this particular decision, that kind of thing. So I'm just telling you this up front, because a lot of people, I'll ask a why kind of question and they give me a what kind of answer and they get points off. They go, well, I don't understand. I said, well, I didn't ask you the definition of the term. You need to read the question. The question didn't say define the term. The question says describe why this one particular feature is appropriate in this scenario. Okay. So the course requirements, there's going to be two major exams, midterm and a final. The final is not comprehensive. So, midterm's first half and finals second half, right? And there's going to be a video review session before the exam that's going to go over all the topics that might appear on the exam, to allow you to laser focus on the things that I'm telling you that are important, rather than just, well, here's the book, have fun. There's going to be take-home quizzes. The take-home quizzes typically are, I give you an hour to do them, but typically most people do it in about 35 minutes. 6 assignments. Typically you're going to be submitting a Word document with embedded things, like if you did your stuff in Java, you'd be just copying your Java code right into this Word document, okay? And then a term project at the end, which is going to be another Word document, maybe a zip file as well. Okay, so here's the percent of grades. The exams, 2 exams are 25% of your grades, so that's 2.5% for the midterm, and I said 2.5, but 12.5 for the midterm and 12 for the final. Quizzes are 30%, assignments are 30%, and your term project is worth 15%. 15%, that's 1.5 letter grades. Like if you decide to blow off the term project, well, I ain't gonna do that dang term project. Well, then whatever grade you had in 1.5 letter grades are going to get dropped from it. So yeah, that's a significant part. So here's the class schedule. Well, this is the weekly schedule with regard to assignments and quizzes. So if you look at this, the semester starts on Tuesday because we have a holiday on Monday. So typically it starts on Monday and ends on Friday. Okay, cool. So everything is due on Friday. So everything is due on Friday, and to include this first week. So yes, this first week, you've got something due. It's called the syllabus quiz. And so the video lectures are going to be, chapter 1, and then right on down the list. Now, for you guys that have the Monday lab schedule, here's how we're doing it. It's the same thing. And then if you have a Wednesday lab schedule, well, then here's how this thing works. So I mentioned, for example, again, that, for example, chapter 10, week 15 is chapter 10, but week 14 is when chapter 10 was being discussed in the video lectures. Okay, here's how the weekly routine typically works. Every Monday, the new batch of videos are released. And then I release my lecture notes. My lecture notes are just some notes that I can use to follow along to make sure I don't miss anything, right? Make sure to talk about this. Make sure you talk about that, right? It's just notes for me. They're my notes, right? I'm not. So I release those, but I do not release those in the same week that the video lectures are. They're always a week out, which means you do not have my notes while you're watching the videos. Okay, we're coming up on the 15-minute mark. Now, I break these things up into 15-minute chunks like you heard me say. So I'm just going to stop this video, and then we'll switch over to part 2.